This morning on BRN, how to protect companies and yourself from data breaches. We're going to welcome back to the program Vincentas Baubonis. He's the head of research for CyberNews. Vincentas, great to see you again. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me again. It's nice to see you too, Jeffrey.
Yep, I haven't changed, and look, our clothes are the same. Imagine that. It's kind of funny how that was. Very ironic. I want to make sure that we have good hygiene and we both shower. But in all seriousness, I mean, you discussed a very important report where 96% of Fortune 500 companies are vulnerable and have been vulnerable to data breaches. Let's kind of shift the conversation, talk about what these companies can do. So, how do you prevent, these data breaches? What can companies in this Fortune 500 do right now to protect themselves and their customers, more importantly?
So you have to have some processes in place, as I mentioned on our last conversation. So it's definitely some education for the employees, so they, spot and report phishing attempts to the superiors, to security operations centers, and so on. Definitely have security operation centers in place, and assign a big enough budget for the security operations center to be able to handle incidents on a timely basis. Just the thing that I personally think of is being aware, of your cybersecurity stance publicly, because recently we've seen a shift into cyber criminals reusing already exposed credentials in systems where credentials are reused. And we've also seen some attempts where cyber criminals buy off databases of already exposed breaches, not just use stealer logs from specific people of specific employees of a company, but they try to acquire some database which might be related to attacked company to get credentials in bulk and try credential reuse. So basically, what I would offer for regular Joe working in the company, never use your credentials. If you're a company who's concerned of your cybersecurity stance, make sure to have processes in place which would check for already reused or compromised credentials on the World Wide Web, and do not let them use on your systems. So you would at least cover the data breach part, which happened to somebody else and would not happen to you then.
And what about training? I know you're talking a lot about, you just mentioned a lot about the cybersecurity staff, but employees, they're part of the company and they can oftentimes create vulnerabilities. How much training do you do? And when is there too much training? Where it's just an overload, like, I know it's cyber risk. I'm just gonna, skip it. So how do you balance that?
So my personal opinion on balancing that is, of course, the company takes more of that pie, because a company has to have more operations in place than just that, more policies in place. If you have a company, a big company, like one of the S&P 500 ones, you have to have some operations like processes more than operations, like zero trust policies. So basically you restrict employees from accessing data, accessing systems, infrastructure, which we're not working with. In generally, you segregate the employees into some groups, you segregate them into individuals, and you have a permission-based system where you apply zero trust principle, and you have a lowest privilege possible for each of the employee. So even if a data breach against some specific employee happens, it's not followed by lateral movement throughout all of the company, or even worse, infrastructure, because that's what cyber criminals, especially ransomware gangs, are targeting. Weak policies of companies, and then they social engineer or try to find exposed credentials, just basically taking easiest way into making a big breach. So for specific, recommendations for each employee, definitely do those cybersecurity trainings which come your way from a company. I don't think there's too much information, to know about basic protection of your oneself, because we're talking not just about the company that you expose. If you reuse credentials, for example, in your bank account in or some other website, Facebook, Twitter, etc., you're exposing yourself in the first place, because the same password can be used against your other accounts. They can be stolen, you can be extorted then, and so on. And definitely dealing with cyber criminals in such cases where extortion is present is probably not the thing you want. And there's a quite big chance you ain't getting anything back. They're gonna social engineer you to the fullest, and that's just what happens.
Uh, what about managing your vendors? Most companies use third-party software. I'm thinking about even like Microsoft Office, or we're using Zoom today. You know, you've got to have responsibility for not only your organization, but how do you evaluate that of your vendors that, you know, with whom you're working?
Yeah, of course. So basically, what you're targeting now is a supply chain attack. So when a vendor of yours is being targeted, like there was quite a big attack last year against MoveIt, which had a lot of data exposed, and it was a vendor of a lot of other companies. So cyber criminals do target that. You have to have some policies and processes in place to evaluate a vendor. I think that every company has their own processes. If they don't, they should definitely have them to evaluate and to rate the vendors to minimize the risk. And as you apply zero trust to each employee and each group of employees, you should apply that to a vendor too. You have to segregate your data from employees' data. You must somehow protect that part as well, not just through individuals, but through vendors that you use, intermediaries that you use as well. So your supply chain has to have a process worked out so your vendor does not access the data as much as possible. That's your own as a company. Or if it has to access that data, you make sure that tokens, credentials, and so on are not reused, so they could not be targeted against you if vendor's data is exposed, and supply chain attack would not happen.
Last question for you, Vincentas. What about consumers? Those of us using a company's services, what can we do to protect ourselves? Because oftentimes, if our data is breached, it may not be a fault of our own. It may be through a third party, like a Fortune 500 company or some other company. What can we do to protect ourselves? Because at the end of the day, these other people can manage the data, but we've got to take some responsibility here.
Of course. So what I would say is definitely, again, do not reuse your credentials in different platforms. Be aware what you're dealing with. So in CyberNews Business Digital Index, we have a list of companies, we have a dashboard, we have each company that we evaluate, assign the rating score, assign the grade, which you can check online through Googling our page and the company you're interested in. We have quite a lot of companies already scanned and evaluated. I could lie about this one, but I think it's around 3,000-4,000 of the biggest companies in the world. So you can actually check before using some service if it's secure enough, if it had data breaches, if it has some policies in place. We do report that. At least reports are generic, so we don't cross some lines, but they're pretty understandable for a general person. So definitely, I would suggest to do your own research through trusted sources, of course, and take care of your cybersecurity hygiene. Without reusing passwords, there's quite a lot of things you could do as a person. You could use a password manager, which encrypts your data, which allows you to store a multitude of passwords and to not remember all of them, maybe have a master key to access. But the important thing is having everything in an encrypted format, is using secure communications, is being aware of what network are you using. It's a pretty common attack scenario to collect data through free unprotected networks like in cafes or so on. So that's a big no-no. I wouldn't use it personally.
Yeah. Well, I guess I need to change my password away from my birthday. That's probably something I should probably do right after this conversation. Vincentas, we're going to have to leave it there. Great to see you. Great information. Great research. Continue the great work. And we look forward to having you back on the program again very soon.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you for having me. It was nice.
And don't forget to subscribe to our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse, for all the news in one place. Details, of course, at our website. And your subscription supports all of this great BRN content. And we're back again tomorrow for another edition of BRN. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.